So, we have been talking about how the birth rate in the United States has fallen to the lowest levels. It is currently sitting at 1.62 births per woman, and it's well below replacement rate. The CDC gives the total number of births. So, what I wanted to do was look at a few states, a few forced birther states, and see what the change was from 2022 to 2023. This is how I decided which states I was going to focus on as far as numbers. I pulled from some of these states that were forced birther states. And I grabbed a piece of paper and an ink pen. So the states that I was targeting: Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Texas, South Carolina. And I know Louisiana is not in order, but Louisiana as well. And so I took the 2022 numbers and looked at the 2023 numbers. And at first, I thought that the numbers would be higher in 2023 since abortion is basically outlawed in these states, but I was wrong. Each and every one of these states saw a decline in births, every last one of them. Alabama dropped 276, Arkansas dropped 167, Georgia dropped 781, Idaho dropped 5, Indiana dropped 742, Kentucky dropped 389, Oklahoma dropped 427, Texas dropped 1,800 and 97, South Carolina dropped 87, Louisiana dropped 1,414. So my theory was wrong. These forced birther states, plural, they're not seeing an uptick in births. They are still seeing a downward trend. And it just goes to show that even with these people thinking that these heavy-handed tactics is going to work, it is not. They are still losing this battle. I'm proud of the ladies. And with this 4B movement, I am totally sure that these numbers are going to continue to fall. I'm sure that these states are going to lose population, because why would women stay in these states? And why would women or young girls decide to stay in these states or go to schools in these states? Why would they stay? So, ladies, I'm proud of you, and I hope that these numbers continue to plummet to hell. Let's talk about how dangerous it is to currently be a pregnant woman in one of these forced birther states. Let's go back to Idaho. Why Idaho's hospitals are having pregnant women airlifted out of state. Since January, Dr. Stacy Sabe, a maternal fetal medicine specialist in Boise, Idaho, has had at least 4 of his patients wheeled into emergency flights and airlifted out of the state while experiencing severe pregnancy complications. One of them was a woman whose water broke around 20 weeks into her pregnancy, putting her at risk of infection. In these types of emergencies, ending the patient's pregnancy can be part of the standard of care. But doctors at the hospital where Sabe works say they have been forced to transfer patients who have these complications out of state to comply with the state's abortion ban. This has become the new normal, which is sad. Idaho bans all abortions with criminal penalties of up to 5 years in prison for anyone who performs one or assists. The law includes limited exceptions for rape, incest, and to save the life of a mother, but there is no exception to protect her health. After oral arguments Wednesday, the Supreme Court is now considering whether Idaho's abortion ban violates federal law that requires hospitals to offer emergency care to patients in crisis. Thus far, justices seem split on that question, with some of the more conservative justices appearing to lean toward the state of Idaho, which has argued that federal law should not supersede its own laws on healthcare. So just let these women die, is basically what they're saying. St. Luke's health system, which includes the hospital where Sabe works, filed an amicus brief in the case, noting that a abortion may be critical to protect a patient from non fatal harms like loss of organs, permanent disability, severe pain, or loss of fertility. It's also said that the ban forces patients to endure potentially risky out of state transfers. Since January 5th, when the Supreme Court lifted an injunction that has shielded doctors providing emergency care, 6 pregnant women at St. Luke's have had to be airlifted out of Idaho during, according to Jim Sousa's, the chief physician executive for St. Luke's. Last year, the system saw only one such transfer. In a news conference after Wednesday's arguments, Idaho Attorney General Ralph Labrador, a Republican, questioned accounts of doctors transferring patients. It's really hard for me to conceive of a single instance where a woman has to be airlifted out of Idaho to perform a abortion. Our law is very clear. It protects doctors, it protects women, it protects unborn children, and it ensures that the doctors can use a subjective standard if they believe that the life of the mother is in jeopardy. Out of state medical transfers can delay needed care and carry immense financial and emotional costs for pregnant women who may wind up far from home during some of the most difficult moments of their lives. The cost of the flight can exceed $10,000, and transportation may also be considered out of network by insurance, increasing the share patients must shoulder themselves. One of the most common complications is when a patient's water breaks in the first 2 trimesters of pregnancy. Last year, the hospital system had 54 such cases, most occurring before fetal viability. Physicians for Human Rights, an organization that has advocated for abortion rights, has also filed an amicus brief in the Supreme Court case. It cites a March report for which the group interviewed several doctors who practice or practiced in Idaho, along with doctors based in neighboring states who received patients who were transferred. Dr. Serena Hare, a physician in Oregon, described receiving a patient from Idaho who was gravely ill when she arrived by air. The patient was 18 weeks pregnant with twins when she suffered a severe pregnancy complication. The patient also had a history of kidney issues and had previously received a transplant. Doctors at her Idaho hospital determined that one of her fetuses had died, and her lab results were troubling. She told her doctors she wanted them to do whatever they had to, including termination, according to the report. But she was ultimately airlifted to Oregon. The following morning, she lost the other fetus too. If the woman had started her care in Oregon, she would have been offered the termination almost immediately. These forced birther states want women to be walking coffins where they are hosting their unviable fetuses. What other medical condition can we think of that would require a patient who's sick to get transported to another state for a legal reason? It just feels really unjust. In a way, you're torturing the women because you're not providing the definitive care until you say they're at the brink of death. Dr. Michelle Heisler, the medical director for Physicians for Human Rights, said in an interview, I think that's the stake here. Doctors in Idaho also described situations in which patients with severe pregnancy complications were unable to leave the state to seek treatment. Dr. Michael Snyder, a maternal fetal medicine specialist in Boise, recalled a patient whose water broke around 20 weeks but declined to be airlifted out of state, in part because she could not leave her family. Expenses were another concern. The woman left the hospital, he said, then returned once she experienced contractions. She went into labor, but her fetus did not survive. Over his decade in medicine, Schneider has learned that vulnerabilities for pregnant women are acute. On his first night of residency at a hospital in Memphis, a patient with sepsis died. That's what keeps me up, that somebody's going to be placed in harm's way or a transport is going to go bad and there's going to be a significant injury to the mother. It doesn't get any worse losing two. These people, these forced birther states, want the mother to perish. They would rather a mother perish than to give doctors the go ahead to save pregnant women's lives. That is what's at stake. That is what's at stake. These forced birthers want to act like it's about unborn babies. No, if the mother dies, then she can't create any other babies. Please keep that in mind when you go vote.
The CDC just released their fertility rate for 2023, and as you can see, it's 1.62, the lowest it's been in like literally centuries. And of course, we're gonna have lawmakers be like, why don't people wanna have babies in America? Even though there's a governor down in Texas that's suing the United States of America over the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, the act that provides protections to pregnant workers in the workplace. And then on top of that, hopefully you don't lose your job during your pregnancy, because if you lose your job, then you're gonna lose your health insurance. It costs around $18,000 to have a vaginal birth here in America, around $25,000 if you have to have a C-section. Hopefully you don't get sick. Hopefully you don't have a high-risk pregnancy or have to be hospitalized, because, especially if you don't have health insurance because you lost your job because you were pregnant. Oh, and then on top of that, hopefully when you deliver your child, it's a very healthy child, because NICU expenses, especially if you don't have health insurance because you lost your job because you were pregnant. Or the fact that we don't have paid parental leave. So hopefully you have enough sick leave to take at least 1 or 2 weeks off. And if you don't, hopefully they don't fire you because you had a baby, which happens. And then you lose your health insurance. And then you don't have any money to pay your hospital bills, let alone food, mortgage, rent. Oh, and then there's childcare. I forgot about childcare. I just paid my $3,200 bill for my pre-K and my toddler and childcare. Yeah, $3,200. Boop, out the window. But yeah, we don't have enough money to start a universal childcare program, even though they just spent like what, $80 billion in aid to other foreign countries. Yeah, we can't start that universal childcare program because why would we need to help Americans? Oh, and then on top of that, you're gonna have to listen to people in the Supreme Court debate how many organs you should lose before you get life stabilizing care. Oh, and then they're just gonna take away your bodily autonomy as well, so. Hopefully you don't have a daughter. Oh, and then on top of that, when you live in a state where there's universal breakfast and lunches, you will be constantly fearing that it'll be taken away because the federal government's like, we don't want to have to fund that. We don't want to have to help out with that. Oh, and then there's like a child tax credit that's just sitting in Senate right now that has been shown to reduce childhood poverty. We're not going to pass that. Nope. Instead, though, we will pass that aid to Israel. So that's cool. That really helps out the American people. Oh, and then on top of that, inflation and like an all-time high of food prices because corporations are greedy and the tax cuts just benefit them. And so now all middle-class families are paying more in taxes than they've ever had to pay, on top of the fact that corporations are getting huge tax breaks and making record profits. But I mean, come on. America's great, right? So why wouldn't you want to have a baby here?
I'm proud of you, you know that. I hope you do.